Amazing what free beer does to the attendance figures. Yes. So I'm Chris Pont. This is my business partner, John Nicholson. We've recently started a consultancy in Ipswich called EG, and we've recently been engaged with, how are we allowed to put it, a large blue chip insurance broker in Ipswich. We're both certified Scrum Masters, and we're both experienced in installation, configuration, and day-to-day use of TFS. So, does anyone here use TFS on a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis? Okay. So we look at what TFS is, and one of the main points is it's not just version control. We know quite a few fairly large companies that have installed TFS, literally just check in, check out. It's what Microsoft describe as a process improvement tool, or you could describe it as an application lifecycle management tool. And it manages all of the development, so requirements, development including source control, but things like code review, so it can manage that for you. Deployment, so using web deploy or packaging or using release management, which John's going to talk to you a bit later. It's brand new with TFS 2013. So new, I think they've missed some of the rebranding in some places. And it also manages tests, so automated testing, manual testing, bug management. Oh, so I missed that there. So there's a number of new things with 2013. So it now supports Git repositories, so distributed source control. Sure, many of you have used Git before. So that's a new addition. When you create a new project, you've got the choice of using either Git repositories or Team Foundation version control. They've added a lot of focus to making more tasks available through the web interface. So you can manage things like test suites, test cases, test plans. You can do code reviews through the front end. You can view any change sets within version control. I think with Visual Studio Online, you can actually edit the code within the web browser. They've got something that's called Agile Portfolio Management. So I'll go through that in a sec. That's to help you manage your work items. There's some new charting, so you can chart all of your work items. You can draw pie charts on how many bugs you have. The priorities of all the different bugs within the system. There's team rooms, so you can chat with your teammates, and it will raise events within team rooms for things that happen with the project. So if somebody raises a new requirement, if somebody does a build and it's successful, or if it fails, you can get it to raise events within that team room. There's the Code Lens, which is unique to Visual Studio Ultimate Edition, unfortunately, which is quite expensive, but there are many organizations that do purchase Ultimate licenses for their staff. And there's a couple of user voice tickets have been raised trying to get Microsoft to include that in Premium, but we'll go through that a bit later. And they've also included cloud-based load testing, so you can fire load tests a website. So going to go through work item tracking just quickly, just because most things within TFS are work items, or they raise work items, or they're linked to work items. So, as I said, Microsoft have included something called Agile Portfolio Management. Oh. Let's try and log on to Wi-Fi. They've included something called Agile Portfolio Management. So, the best way to explain this, it's something that I heard at an Agile talk a little while back, is you might have mountains, boulders, rocks, pebbles, and sand to describe your requirements. So sand is the real fine-grain tasks that your team might work on. So it might be create some SQL tables, create an MVC view, something like that. And then it kind of scales up from there. So, right up to mountains, which are the massive, initiatives that an organization might take on. So Agile Portfolio Management is there to actually help organize those work items. So where you've got tasks, you've got product backlog items, or what's known as user stories. Now they they contain many tasks. But then you might have features above that. They contain many product backlog items, or what might be described as epics. And then you can customize it and take it back as many levels as you want. So you have this whole hierarchy that manages your work items. And you can give users different views or different backlogs. So they might contain features, they might contain initiatives, they might contain PBIs, depending on what level they want to see those work items.
We find this particularly useful for managing the business. You really don't want the business to see your dirty laundry, even though Scrum dictates that you should be open. So by giving them a slightly higher level of requirement that they see, and manage and prioritize, you can still deliver inside that, and still have the business fully bought in and organizing, and they can understand that a little bit better.
Yes, they can log in, they can prioritize their features and not actually see what happens on a day-to-day basis. They just know that certain features are going to be included in certain releases. They can target releases with their features. So everything within work item tracking is customizable. So there's process templates that dictate how you can manage your work items, what kind of flow they take across your agile board. So you can customize that. You might have different reasons associated with changing state. So with bugs, you might move it to cannot reproduce, or it's actually a feature, or things like that. You can also customize the work items themselves. So, sorry, I'm probably in the way here. So where you'd actually create a product backlog item and write down your requirements, you can fully customize that view. You can add different pieces of metadata. You can add drop-downs. You can completely rearrange that view, add stuff, remove it, put it within different tabs. You can switch out the description box so that you could add in a different text editor. You could add in Tiny MCE or something like that would allow you to document your requirements. You can also subscribe to alerts on work items. So, if somebody raises a new requirement, if a build fails, if somebody requests a code review, then you can subscribe to alerts there so that you get emailed of the new item. And there's a number of reports based around work items, things like burn down charts. So depending on how many hours are left on all of your tasks, it will draw a burn down graph for you. Cumulative flow. You've actually got the Kanban board itself, which is the column view where you can drag work items across. And as I mentioned, you've got team rooms as well. I'm going to go into a quick Eclipse demo, as I think there's a few Java developers in the room. Hey. I'm going to note, though, that I'm not a Java developer. I've just about managed a hello world. So if I've not laid this project out correctly or anything wrong there, it's just about hanging together. And hopefully it's going to demo some of the functionality within Team Explorer. So we've got this Eclipse plugin here, and what I'm going to do is just quickly connect. We're still connected here. Yeah. So this is actually going to connect to. Sorry, just log in quickly. So this is actually going to connect to visualstudio.com. I'll go through that in a bit, but it's basically Microsoft's hosted version of TFS. Internet connection allowing. Okay. There we go. So I think this is similar to the Jira plugin that you can get for Eclipse. And basically, you've got 4 different items here. So we've got Git Repository Explorer, and that basically brings up the Git repository just there. So this is actually connected to the new Git functionality within TFS 2013. And basically within here, what it's doing is it's creating a build wrapper around Ant. So it's actually wrapping that and running that build project within TFS Online. So what I'm going to do is just make a quick change here. Just add that in. Ah, there we go. A bit better. Where's the file I've changed? So I'm going to commit and push that. Probably a little slow over this connection. If I go into builds, hopefully what we should see is a CI build or a continuous integration build, and that's just kicked off there. So as soon as anyone checks in any file changes to the Git repository for TFS, it's detecting that change and kicking off a build to verify it. So what I'll do here, why was that not showing? No. It's not showing any queued build for some reason. Ah, sorry, wrong one. There we go. So we've got a completed build there. That's completed that Java build with Ant. We can download the drop here, and I can see my Hello World project. It's built the jar file, and I've got some log files within there as well. So it's just really to prove that you can actually build Java projects. It will support Ant as well as Maven, so it will build with both. So Visual Studio Online, as I just mentioned, it's Microsoft's hosted version of TFS. You can sign up for an account, and you get up to 5 users for free, with unlimited team projects and private repositories. So, there's other hosted versions out there that put a limit on how many repositories you can have. This is unlimited. You get you actually get 60 minutes of build time per month, which doesn't sound a lot, but for a fairly small project, that should pretty much that should be okay. You can buy additional minutes for 5 cents per minute, so it's not particularly expensive. And if you're an MSDN subscriber, you get 15,000 user minutes of load test per month that you can fire at your website just to test the load. So just to go through development quickly, so there's a task board and capacity management. So this task board on the left here, you can see exactly what your team's working on. So that's the fine-grained, the sand that I was talking about earlier. It's build a database table, it's create a new view, and that there is actually tracking hours against those tasks. How many hours are left on each particular task? You can see who's working on it and what the state of that is. And if you fill in the capacity of your team, so you can fill in how many hours per day each team member manages and what discipline they're looking at, be it design, development, test, etc. You can get this chart on the right, and that tracks how many hours are left on all of your tasks for each particular sprint. And it will flag to you if there's any capacity issues. So here we can see, there's 67 hours left for the whole team, but only 40 hours left within that sprint. Looks like development's okay, but a particular team member doesn't have enough hours left within that sprint. Yeah, I'm going to flick across to a Visual Studio demo now. I've got a TFS install working on some virtual machines here on my Mac. And And what I'm going to do is just take you through some of the development features. Let's just get some notes up. So, yeah, this is the type of view that you get within Visual Studio. And it's similar to the view that you get within Eclipse. So, you know, you've got a few more items here because it's using Team Foundation version control instead of Git. What I was going to mention here is if you link particular work items, you know, user requirements that you're working on to the changes that you're making to the code, there's a few features that are actually quite nice. So, so here we've got code suspend. I've actually linked a story, create KPI service, to the changes that I've made. And what I can do is suspend that. And it shows suspended work for that user story. What it actually does as well is it puts notes against that story on the task board to say that the work has been shelved, and it gives the shelf set name. So that means that any other team member, for example, if somebody's off ill on a particular day, any other team member can go into that user story or that task. They can see that work has been suspended, and they can pull out that change set and continue work on it. And then, you know, if it's just a case of I needed to suspend work so I could work on a high priority bug, I can suspend that. It will shelve all of my changes, revert the source control back to the version that I originally checked out. I can work on that bug, check that in, and then within here I can resume work. It reapplies my changes to the current workspace, and I can continue work. There's also code review. So I mean, here I can request a review, but I've got a code review sat here, ready and waiting. That's one that I pretended John sent to me earlier. So if I open that one, because it's linked to particular work items, I've got context there. I can see exactly why those changes were made. But I can then see which files have been changed. I can click on this one, for example, and I can see this line of code here has been changed. I can add comments to that particular line. So if I highlight some code there, I can right-click, add a comment. This needs doing differently. Save and enter. So that's saved against that code review. I can add a file comment against the file itself, or I can add an overall comment for the whole code review to say, you know, this needs to be done differently, or you know, give some hints as to what needs to be done.
Just going back to that one, we found that really, really necessary when working with offshore teams. So that's been our lifeline.
Yeah.
For ensuring that the code is working in the way that we expect, in the way we want, defining design and seeing the output before it's checked in, before it breaks anything. It's made a world of difference. It's meant that we've had to do some pretty major refactors once we've received some code, but yeah, it's definitely improved the quality. And it's a bit of a learning experience for junior team members as well, because you can highlight lines of code and just tell them how they should have done it originally, or give them some hints. So it helps train your staff as well. It's also fairly good practice for more senior people as well. It doesn't debate and dialogue about best practice. Because if everyone's peer reviewing each other, that code review system isn't just a one-off send them comments, it's actually a conversation. So the person can receive their review, add more comments, say I've corrected this, and send it back for review again.
So it can go backwards and forwards any number of times. The other thing, actually, you just triggered something for me. The other thing that we've implemented for working with offshore teams or working with more junior members of staff, if I can get to the right tab, within the builds which get triggered as part of CI, what else is it? trigger. There we go. So within builds, against each build we can say how it needs to be triggered. So we can have a manual build that just sits there, and you can right click on, just say, right, I want to queue a new build, and off it will go. Continuous integration is what we saw earlier as part of the Eclipse build. So as soon as somebody checks something in, it'll go ahead and build, make sure everything's okay. Rolling builds, I mean, it will basically accumulate a number of check-ins before it will do a build. If there's anything checked in before that one's finished, then it will roll those up and build the next set. But gated check-in is the one that we found particularly useful. I mean, you could argue there's probably a problem with your team if you feel gated check-in's necessary. But what that does is when somebody checks in some code, rather than actually applying it to the code set, rather than applying that to change control, it creates a change set. When the build takes place, what it will do is it will check out the latest version of the code, apply that change set, and then do a build. Make sure your code actually builds. It will run unit tests, or however far you want to go with it, really. You could run unit tests, integration tests, just bearing in mind that people are waiting for their change sets to go in. And you could even run code analysis across it to say, your code needs to meet a certain standard. And only once that build is complete will it actually apply that to version control. So it basically means that any code that's checked in will actually build, because it's had to build to get into the repository. Let's change that.
The other thing to state is not only have to build, it has to pass any of the tests. If any test fails, that's also counted as a failure and spat back at them.
There's actually a little taskbar notifier that you can get, and that sits there and monitors any builds. If your build fails, then you have a little pop-up that says, your build has failed. You need to rectify any issues with it. The other thing that I wanted to go through, this is what I mentioned earlier. It's only available on Visual Studio Ultimate, but it's quite a nice feature. If you flag any changes you make with the work items that you're working on, or the bugs that you're working on, you get this extra line above any of your constructors or methods or classes, and it tells you what's been affected by that code, or what's affected that code. So this example here, you do actually see my mouse pointer, cool. You can see there's 3 references to that constructor, which is fine. It shows you that 6 out of the 11 unit tests that apply to this constructor are passing, so there's obviously issues there. It tells you anyone who's changed that code, so we've got the last person who changed it, Francis Totten, plus 1 other. It shows there's 3 changes made to it. 2 of them were bugs, or 3 changes that apply to 2 bugs and 2 work items. And you can click on those and it will show you exactly what bugs have been checked in or marked as affected by some code that was changed in this particular area. It also shows there's 2 code reviews done for some code in that area. And also it will flag any upstream changes. So if you've branched some code and you feel you're going to merge it back in at some point, it will show you how many upstream changes are marked against this method. So it's a really nice feature. Unfortunately, it's only available in Visual Studio Ultimate.
There's also an element that does psychomatic complexity as well.
Yeah, there's maintainability indexes and things like that. Yeah, they're really cool. Update 3 for TFS includes Git changes as well, so it will parse a Git repository and pull out any changes and authors. Yeah, I'm going to go through a test manager demo now as well. So test manager is let's just drag that down. Test manager is a tool here. As I said, you can maintain your test plans, test suites, and test cases within the web interface. But there is a native tool that does that as well, and that's called Test Manager. So within here, there's 2 sides to this. You've got the testing center and the lab center. So the lab center, I can set up environments. So I can mark my test machines, my web servers, my test controllers, etc. I can mark them within here. I can also, with System Center Virtual Machine Manager, I think, isn't it? Which is another Microsoft product. You can spin up virtual machines, and you can actually create template machines. So you could create template web servers, for example, and when you want to go ahead and run your tests, it will spin up virtual machines based off those templates. It will deploy your code, run all the tests it needs to, and then tear them back down again. So it does that all on the fly. But I mean, here I've got a standard environment, so that's based off actual machines, and I've only got one machine because it's sort of all running off my MacBook here. You can define all your test settings and everything. But within the testing center, I've got a test plan, a test suite, and I've got a test case here called Test Web Login. What I've actually done here is I've recorded a coded UI test, and they're really easy to create. Basically, you create a coded UI test within Visual Studio, and as soon as you create that project, it will start the coded UI test recorder. And basically, you can then record a test through a web application, clicking through, filling in your user details or filling in different fields. And that will create your coded UI test for you. It also it creates a parameter set, so you can actually change the parameters. You can fill in different user details and then run the test. So here I've got this test case. So if I go to the test tab, I can run this test. There we go. And what I was going to do, I thought I was going to beat it to it. There we go. So on the machine that's running my test agent, that's actually running the test. So it will spin up a browser. It's now clicking through. It's not going to find the username field, so it's actually going to, that's been renamed, so it's actually going to fail the test. So I just run through what the test output is for that failure. Still active. So it actually has a pretty high level of reporting from any test failures. You can get it to raise bugs automatically. Let's see if that's back. Yeah, there we go. Right, test failed. So we can see the tests that have run. So that's all detailed here. And it gives us a list of, sorry, the resolution on the screen is not very good, but so it gives us a list of items here. So we've got an event log, we've got a code coverage file down the bottom, but the interesting one is this test run. So if I open that up in Visual Studio, I can get all the details for that test failure. So it's given me a whole level of diagnostics. It's given me an error message, and it's told me here, told me just here that it can't find the username field, and that's because it was renamed. It's given me a whole stack trace. It's actually given me a screenshot, so I can open that up, and it will show me a screenshot of when the test failed, which is really useful because if you're running quite complex coded UI tests and it's run through a whole user journey, it'll show you exactly what screen has caused the issue. You can get it to record a WMV file as well, so it will actually record a movie of the test agent running through the test, so you can see exactly what's happened. And again, another Visual Studio Ultimate only feature is these IntelliTrace files. So we've got event logs, so we can look at those. We've actually got IntelliTrace files. For those who don't know what IntelliTrace is, it kind of picks up on certain events that happen within .NET. So you can get it to pick up on ADO.NET events, so any calls to SQL, you can get it to flag up those issues. Again, I haven't got Visual Studio Ultimate, but if I did, I could open up that IntelliTrace file and see exactly what's been traced, through what's been run on the web server. So So that's a really powerful tool and really good for verifying new environments. So you could spin up a QA build, just get it to run through a whole host of coded UI tests, go through loads of user journeys just to verify that that environment is sort of stable. And then, yeah, worth a mention is just some of the reports and charts that are available within TFS. It contains a whole host of reports, reporting on your current velocity, from the last 5 or 6 sprints, your burn down chart. The build summaries are really good, and I actually get these sent to me quite regularly. So these will sort of flag up any builds that have happened within TFS, tell you how many tests have passed, what your current code coverage is, so how much of your code is covered by unit tests. And an interesting one is code churn. So that tells you how many lines of code have been changed by that check-in. So if you have a 10,000 line code churn check-in, you probably want to go and find out what's caused it. Has somebody done a massive refactoring exercise, or anything a bit more sinister? So you can keep an eye on where your code quality is. And yeah, build success over time. It will report on how many builds you've had, which ones are failing more regularly, etc. I think that's it. Any questions?
What about Xcode?
That's quite an interesting one. Xcode will only build on a Mac. So there are ways around it. Basically, I've seen some scripts that will plug into TFS, but you'll need to host a Mac somewhere for that to happen. And basically what it will do is it will effectively use PuTTY or P-Link to remote onto the Mac. It will copy the build files across onto the Mac, build it, parse any of the output, copy the output back onto the build server, and then report from there. But because you can only build Xcode projects on a Mac, that's pretty much the only way you can do that.
It is worth noting that is supported by Visual Studio Online, that setup. So Visual Studio Online is software as a service, but you don't have to use the online build controllers. You can hook your own build controllers into that. So if you've got a Mac Mini sat somewhere that you're just using for your builds or anything like that, there's no reason you couldn't host a Windows VM with your build controller on there, talking to the Mac Mini to do builds.
And that's quite useful. I mean, the hosted Visual Studio Online only supports a limited set of software because you are used to using a hosted build controller. So if you want to go a bit further, if you need any other software for your build that you can't use as a NuGet package, then you can just hook another build controller into TFS Online. Still have your code hosted in the cloud, but it will kick off any builds with your hosted server.
One of the things my team have completely neglected to use, and so we've opted out of it, is the team views function.
Mm-hmm.
Have you found any companies are actually using that and getting anything good out of it?
No, not really. I mean, I don't think I haven't really seen very much.
A number of teams working together over a certain scale for it to be worthwhile. If you think about most Microsoft development teams you've worked in around here, they're either co-hosted in the same room or they're below a certain size, so they're talking continually anyway. I think the traceability you get from the work items is more than enough in most cases.
Mm. Hey.
Actually, 2 questions. We're currently using version in Foundation. Most of the features you mentioned, are they only available in 2013?
Yes.
I know, it sounds like a silly question.
The product as a whole has got considerably better over the last couple of releases. So yeah, a lot of the new features are only available in the later versions.
Okay, and in terms of that version, is there any cut-off point from Microsoft in terms of their older features that they're still willing to support in version 2.0?
So TFS always has a solid upgrade path, and it's generally had fairly good backwards compatibility as far as the clients go. So if you upgraded your servers, for example, you could still now use the Visual Studio 2005 client to connect in. It's an absolute pain in the ass to get it working, but it does work. There's been quite a paradigm shift in the way the projects are stored and worked with since 2005. So previously you had one database and one collection of projects. From 2010 they switched that to multiple collections, and that's been the biggest problem connecting 2008 and 2005 clients to it. But if you're at 2010 onwards, there's pretty much nothing that you can't really upgrade to or use.
The only other thing to bear in mind with upgrades is customized work item templates and process templates. Occasionally they break when you do an upgrade. Anyone else? No? Okay, thanks everyone. John's going to continue after the break to do the release management talk.